The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Firstly, can I thank the Minister for his clear description of the facets and the technical nature of this piece of legislation. The Labor Party will be supporting the legislation to Select Committee. We want to obviously have a look at and see if the Minister's eloquence is borne out by fact in submission. I know he's an enthusiast when it comes to the tax system. He was telling us before the dinner break that. Look, there are a number, and I won't reiterate what the Minister says, but there are a number of practical measures which will simplify and make more efficient the tax system for New Zealanders who have to meet their tax obligations, especially those who are in business. I suppose I want to also just widen the discussion slightly and say that though this is a worthy piece of legislation, I do hope, and I have some confidence having listened to the Acting Minister, I do hope this piece of legislation is in far better shape, and not only far better shape, but actually does what it says it will do, other than the rather bizarre piece of legislation we dealt with, which was the land registry legislation through IRD, and what comes post that, which is the bright line test, which having worked through again the submissions where every submitter on the bright line test opposed it, and almost every submitter agreed that it basically wouldn't do and wouldn't achieve the policy objectives, then I do hope that this is a quality piece of legislation. I don't mean any detriment to the officials, but I do hope this is a quality piece of legislation that at its basis and on the surface seems to have some very positive and practical effects for taxpayers. They are not earth-shattering, by the way. Electronic signatures, sharing of information, the share technicalities and KiwiSaver, these are on the face of it pretty practical and efficient measures, but they are not earth-shattering. I think there needs to be, sir, a philosophy change within the IRD. The IRD, as its core function, is to preserve the integrity of New Zealand's fiscal position and ensure that we as taxpayers pay our fair share. And that is critical. It's critical to our economy. It's critical to the running of a government and of a country, and that goes without saying. However, the IRD, I think, in recent years has had a philosophy. Their philosophy is we're going after the cash. We're going to go after the cash. And we're going to go after as much cash as we can. Now, as I've just said, they have an obligation to do that. But I think there needs to be a shift in focus also, and you don't have to have one without the other, to flexibility. If you're a small business person, basically, the tax system is not designed for you. It isn't flexible for you. The tax system runs you. You don't have a lot of options within the tax system. And the Labor Party, Andrew Little put out a discussion document dealing with a very detailed discussion document vetted by one Robin Oliver. And for those who don't know who Robin Oliver is, he was a former Deputy Commissioner of the IRD of long standing, an eminent person. I would say that whether I'd had no involvement with him in respect of the discussion document, but I would say that regardless, an eminent person, a person probably the best mind in New Zealand, I would argue, in respect of the mechanics and technicalities of our tax system. I suspect that both sides of the House who dealt with Robin, those of us who dealt with him over the years, would agree on that. And we put together a provisional tax policy, and we asked Robin as a professional, he is now a professional financial accounting advisor to businesses around the country, we asked him would he look at our ideas and would he vet them? Would he go through and tell us whether they work, because we don't have access to officials. And essentially, our proposal in terms of provisional tax gives businesses of any shape or form, of any volume, the ability to align their tax payments with their cash flow. Setting their own rates, still having to meet their tax obligations, of course. They don't pay any less tax, but they can align their cash flow arrangements and their tax payments with their cash flow arrangements. And I won't sort of bore the House with that, but that's out there in the ether and has received very positive comment. My only question is why it is that the IRD, under the stewardship of Peter Dunn, originally the longest standing Revenue Minister, I think, in the history of the Commonwealth Parliaments, Mr Speaker. I think I have checked the record. And that portfolio inherited by Todd McClay, why the IRD hasn't been mandated to get stuck into some of those gritty issues, things that would really help small business. You know, if you're a motelier, you know, come summer, you know, the rooms are full, the money is coming in, but you're taxed the same way. Come winter, you know, the rooms are empty, the cash flow's down, you're still taxed in the same way. And you don't have, and you're subject to that sort of the evil, which is provisional tax, which has often been the death knell of many business, not big business, not because the business person is incompetent, not because they're a crook, just because the total inflexibility of the provisional tax system. I remember when I had a business, and I was lucky enough, I made enough money so I could hire an accountant, hand him a suitcase full of the documentation, the receipts, and say, sort it out for me, please. Most of our small businesses, the partner, the husband or the wife, or the kids or whoever under dark light in the evening are doing the books, or the proprietor themselves doing the books and trying to wade through and make ends meet and make the system work for them to meet their IRD tax obligations. So we would argue that this is, on the surface, a pretty practical piece of legislation, but we hope it's better than the land registry, which is a farce. We hope it's better than the bright line test, which is an equal farce, because it won't, and that's what every submitter said that opposed it. Even the National Party's mates opposed it, but we would hope, we pray that this piece of legislation will be far more practical and will have a positive effect and will actually meet the policy obligations, unlike those other two farcical pieces of legislation, one of which I think we deal with this week. But as I say, I think the IRD does need to broaden its focus. We're not saying the IRD should slack off in going after taxpayers and ensuring they meet their obligations, but they should be also looking very, very clearly as they spend, what, $130 million and counting on a business transformation project where I don't think we've struck a keystroke on a computer yet. We've got a few reports. But they ought to be looking at how they can be more flexible and how the tax system, the functionality of that tax system, can work for businesses. And I'm sure colleagues over there, I know one who's a vintner in the corner who runs a very successful business. That gentleman, whose name, forgive me, I can't recall, that gentleman will have a large amount of experience, I suspect, in dealing with the IRD, and will be able to explain to us tonight, I'm sure, the strictures and the mind-bending problems that you have unless you're a large business with an accounting department or access to top-class accountants. If you are a small entity, the real challenges and difficulties you have with a rigid and inflexible tax system. So my plea to the government is put up these pieces of legislation. We'll support the Select Committee. We'll have a good look at it. Hopefully there will be one or two submitters that will support it and not 100% who opposed the last piece of legislation that Mr Bennett put through FEC. But my plea is that the IRD needs to really look at hardcore practical measures which will assist and allow flexibility for businesses, so businesses can have control of their own financial situation, so that the IRD can, in a practical and operational way, acknowledge that businesses just don't make the same money every week or every year or every season. They have fluctuations, they have seasonality, they have different cash flow difficulties. And maybe the National Party might want to take up the challenge, grab our discussion document, as vetted by Robin Oliver, an eminent tax expert in New Zealand, and have a look at it in a bipartisan way, might want to adopt it. Although I am told by the rumour mill that since we released that discussion document, the IRD has gone into hyperdrive, grabbed it, got the Xerox out, flicked it around the department and said, hey, how did the opposition with no resources come up with this? Maybe, and the minister said, maybe we've got to pip them at the post and come out with our own proposal that'll mirror theirs before the next election. But we live in hope. I'm going to enjoy Mr Bennett's speech because he'll be able to give us a dissertation, sir, on the practicalities of this legislation and how it's going to benefit those thousands, tens of thousands of small businesses. And I pray, sir, that somebody out there, when the submitters submit to the Select Committee, actually does support it.